Black Magic Woman podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on. We also acknowledge traditional owners of the land where you, the listener or viewer, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to our elders past and present and acknowledge that this always was Aboriginal land and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mandanara Bales.
Welcome to another episode of the Black Magic Woman podcast. My name is Mandanara Bales, and here I am joining you from, especially our viewers on YouTube, joining you from the beautiful lands of the Gadigal peoples here in Sydney on the beautiful harbour. It's a place that brings back a lot of childhood memories for me. On this episode, we're joined by a brother, Mitchell Ross, who has been around for a while. Not as long as your brother Brad. So big shout out to Brad Cook. I know we said, Brad, you got to get on first because you are the older brother and we've known each other longer. But Brad, you're not responding to my calls. I can't get hold of you. So here we are today with Mitchell Ross. Thank you so much for making time last minute, as we not always operate like this. We are professional. We are in business. But just thanks for dropping things last minute to be here today.
Not a problem. I'm very grateful. I appreciate the call up and very happy to hear that I'm on before Brad.
Rubbish salt into the wound. Mitch, for people that don't know you, tell us, your mob, where you grew up, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a Bidjigal man from Perouse here in Sydney, so not too far from where we are today. Grew up in Perouse my whole life. Went to Perouse Primary School, Matraville High, which is, pretty much the schools that a lot of the local mob go to. That was kind of my education. I guess I had a, pretty stable home environment. Both mum and dad are still together, had, strong jobs, great role models for kind of work ethic and hard work and stuff like that. And I think that kind of was instilled in me. It took a while because I, as you do when you're kind of in your early 20s and early adult years, you kind of party a little bit and stuff like that. But that was always instilled in me, and obviously I've brought that into my business life. But I suppose early career for me, I was very passionate about technology and IT, so I worked in different IT roles with internet service providers and other providers where I'd repair computers and do networking, virus removals, all that kind of stuff. A lot of small business support and a little bit of corporate stuff. So that was my early career. But always had a passion to want to work for myself. That's a nice way to put it. I didn't like working for other people is probably the best way to put it. So that was kind of, how I got into business. But from a personal point of view, got a beautiful wife, Laura, 2 boys, Brady and Carter, 8 and 4.
I saw your beautiful post to your beautiful wife on Insta.
Yes.
So I was going to make sure that you mentioned.
Absolutely, yep. So, that was my Mother's Day post. But yeah, I mean, they're obviously, as you know, being in business is tough, and a lot of the time you're working long hours and things like that. So, Laura's very supportive, and it's always good to come home after a tough day, or even if I'm working from home, to jump off the computer and spend some time with them. And obviously the boys are pretty can get pretty wild at times, and especially the young one is a little bit of a rough nut. But just obviously spending time with them, and even though sometimes it's not as much as I'd like, it's always awesome to spend time with them and be with them and get to travel and stuff like that. And
I'm so keen to hear, especially for others, especially our mob that have grown up in Sydney or even went to Matraville High. What was the next step? Before you got into IT, did you go to uni? Did you go to college?
Not at that time. So when I left high school, I mean, I just didn't like school at all. I was always, in primary school, I was always very, very good from an education point of view. I'd always, do very well in school. And
was
when
you
I
the
started
teacher's
high school, probably in primary school, I was a little bit like that. Yeah.
I reckon I was. I didn't think so at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did. I was always get strong grades, often, be first in class in a lot of things in primary school. As I sort of went into high school, that it started that way. But as I started developing more friendships, I kind of wanted to focus more on my social life than my education, and then that just went sort of downhill as I went through high school. Not that I wasn't probably capable, I just prioritized other things.
There's other interests.
Yeah.
Distractions.
Exactly. Distractions is a good way to put it. So by the time I got into year 11 and 12, and I did finish year 12, I was just over school, and I just had no desire whatsoever to go to uni. I'd always play around with computers even when I was at school, so I always had that just, I can pick things up very quickly, and I just taught myself how to do repairs, and got a job in Bondi in a computer shop after I finished school. So
with no technical qualifications,
no
formal.
I did a little bit of TAFE when I got that job, just some sort of on the job stuff.
But what led you to going into that line of work?
Just passionate and loved it. Loved playing around with technology. Still love tech to this day. But yeah, that was kind of what got me into that space.
And today, you're running a business, or is there many businesses? I do know of one business in particular, because I saw the kind of, I don't know, the buzz, the hype, the media release in 2019 that your business, which you can talk about, received probably the largest contract for office supplies across Commonwealth Bank. Probably the largest contract for an Indigenous business, I think, ever. I could be wrong. But tell us about your business.
Yeah, so I suppose after being in IT for so long, I was looking for opportunities to grow because, in IT, iPads and computers are so cheap that there wasn't a lot of work going around. So I was looking for opportunities. I was introduced to Supply Nation. That was in 2011. Signed up and joined. Didn't really know what supplier diversity was all about, but thought there's an opportunity to grow my business. I went to my first Connect conference in 2012 in May, and was just way in over my head. I went as my IT business because I did have an IT business, and I had flyers designed, and those flyers were really targeted towards SMEs, small businesses, or consumers, because I used to do that kind of support. And I'm handing those flyers to procurement managers from the biggest companies in Australia and government organisations, and I'm like, I'm so out of my league here. But I suppose I was able to identify that that business didn't fit. I didn't feel like I didn't fit. It was the business that I didn't feel like that fit that world. So pretty much right after that event, I closed that business down, and I started Muru. And that was, I started Muru Group in 2012. So Muru Group, initially the idea around that was because I love technology so much, I wanted to stay in that space, but I had some mentors, and big shout out to Michael McLeod, who's a big mentor of mine. And I guess urged me to, when working with corporates, take a lower risk approach, and that was get out of IT services, and I wanted to resell product. So I wanted to stay in IT, but just start with resale of products. So I started with ink cartridges because my IT kind of world, I had a bit of a connection, and so I started selling ink cartridges.
And you knew what you were selling. You knew enough about ink cartridges to be able to sell ink cartridges, right?
Definitely, yeah. So at that point in time, I understood, because even though I did a little bit of that already in my IT career. So I just stopped doing the services and just focused just on the resale of the product. But I was getting into large corporates. So I'm getting a little bit of work in Sydney in that space. And so my goal was, okay, I'll get in, build some relationships, and then I'll start selling other IT products. Unfortunately, the customers asked me for pens and paper instead.
As they do.
As they do, right? And when you're
selling ink cartridges, why can't you sell some paper?
Exactly. So back then, I never would have ever thought that I'd be in the stationery industry, but an office supplies industry. But that's what the customer wanted. And when you're starting in business, you kind of just say yes to everything. So that's what I did. And then I had to kind of figure out how I would get that product to them. With ink cartridges, there's national suppliers who deliver for you. So you put an order in and they deliver to the customer's door. When it comes to paper, pens, all those stationery items, that doesn't happen. And you need to either warehouse it or find a partner. And so we stumbled along for a little while trying to do it ourselves for about 12 months or so. And that just wasn't possible. So I went back to Supply Nation and said, do you have anyone I can kind of partner with? And they introduced me to our current partner, which is Complete Office Supplies, or COS, as they're known for short. And they were, at that point, the fourth largest stationery business in Australia. But they're Australian-owned, family business, and they kind of saw merit in creating a partnership with us. So in 2014, I created, with them, we founded Muru Office Supplies, and that's a 51% owned by myself and 49% owned by COS. And so that created gave us national capability. So COS has warehouses in every capital city, and a strong distribution channel which we were able to leverage. So
it made sense.
Yeah, it made sense. So and still at that point, I still have no idea about stationery, but I'm gonna just jump in and learn as much as I can about that industry and go along on that journey. So I'd had sales skills and very strong customer service skills from being in IT for so long and selling computers and all that kind of stuff. So I had that, down pat. Yeah. It was just learning the intricacies of that stationery industry.
You would have had some level of knowledge and understanding and experience for the fourth largest office supply company in Australia to want to go into business with you.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, they'd obviously seen, like, I'd spoken heavily about my IT business and even prior to the business being in lots of IT roles and understanding how that IT distribution channel worked, and that gave me, it was easy to kind of jump across to, a different product, a different industry, because it was very similar in a sense of you're distributing and delivering product. There wasn't the IT service element, but there are some services that we offer through the stationery business, which I'll talk about soon. But yeah, there was a little bit of alignment, and obviously they saw how I guess communicated and spoke, and that was obviously they saw potential there that in partnering with me.
Well, I can see that it was a mutually benefit. It mutually benefited both of you. I just want to point out the fact, because I know that a lot of people within the community, within the Indigenous business sector community, talk about joint ventures, black-cladded businesses, and all of the kind of, the Supply Nation or Indigenous Business Australia. There's all these different conversations that are happening, and some of them are actually not exactly true or not correct, or it's misinformation. What I want to point out to a lot of our listeners, especially, Indigenous people in business, there's nothing wrong with seeking a partner to go into business with where there is mutual benefit. What I have an issue with, and I think a lot of our mob have an issue with, is when some of these giant big companies come to our mob and take advantage of our mob and utilise them for their own financial gain. This is not the case.
Yeah, look, I completely agree.
I just love the fact that we can showcase where joint ventures, especially the fact that you went out to source, you went looking. There are some organisations, and if you don't know their story, then, it's, I don't know, it's not saying, well, don't be quick to judge. If you don't know people's story of how the partnership came about, or then be mindful of what you say about joint ventures or what you're assuming is a black-cladded business.
Look, I completely agree. I mean, there's obviously a reputational damage, and, there's obviously the personal impact that can have on someone's life as well if it's unfairly, if they're unfairly judged. But I think the litmus test for me, being in that partnership now for 9 years, when I see other partnerships form, is definitely not being quick to judge. But I think time is what tells, right? If there's capability development, that will show in time, and the Indigenous partners being upskilled and they're learning the industry, and that they're fully involved in the business decisions and operations, and that time is what kind of tells how that partnership is benefiting both parties, right?
Yeah, well, so 9 years is evidence.
Yeah.
Now, this is a good partnership.
Yes.
And have you managed now, like you said, you've got another company, you've managed to then kind of broaden, I don't know, cast your net wider?
Look, there's
you're sticking to one thing.
I mean, the office supplies is my primary kind of focus. There are some passion projects on the side, but I guess from that partnership in 2014, there's been so many, it's been a roller coaster since. There's been a lot of learnings, and as you said, in 2019, it kind of all changed for us. We did win that contract with the Commonwealth Bank, which I think at the time was the largest, as you said, Indigenous contract that the bank had ever awarded. I'm not sure whether that's still the case, but very proud moment for me. It's interesting because during that tender process, they actually asked a question, what does the next 5 years look like for you? And I guess I'd never thought, when we won that contract, that revenue increase put us into a situation where, we're getting close to 20 million in revenue, and I'd never even thought that was achievable for me in business.
You just wanted to sell ink cartridges.
Exactly. And so that question really challenged me. I mean, I don't know whether that played a role in us winning, but I had to kind of create this whole, what did I think the future looked like? And I guess Muru, and the reason I chose Muru in business is Muru means pathway in my language. And I wanted that to represent, not only the journey or the path that I'd been on through my life and career, but I wanted that to align to our vision, which is, to create a pathway for future generations of First Nations people. And so I created this, plan in the document, in that 5-year plan called the Pathway to 100. And that's, our goal to be a $100 million revenue business in the stationery industry. So, and there was, 3 stages of that plan. And, I'm happy to say that, we're on track this financial year to beat that $20 million revenue. And so now it's to the next goal for us. So stationery is definitely my core focus. Since that Commonwealth Bank partnership, I think in the same month we won a contract with Qantas. And since then there's been a lot more. And, Telstra last year was one of the largest, next largest companies we brought on board. And there's been lots of others in between. So, there's so much more market share and so much more opportunity in that sector that I definitely want to continue my focus there. And I've got a team of 6, 5 of us are Aboriginal people across the country, and then so it's growing that team. Our focus is on customer relationship, sales, and marketing. So I'm building a team of salespeople, which I think is definitely a rare skill for our people as well. It's not even though we've been selling for millions of years, doing it in a kind of commercial world, the white man's world is very
it's a transactional versus relational, right?
Exactly.
We are experts in relationships. We are experts when it comes to human psychology. Black fellas can walk into a room, sense things, feel things, pick up things, our gut. Very intuitive. Mm-hmm. To kind of flip that and go, I'm not one to sell, but I can build relationships. You could still be an amazing salesperson and still be an expert in building relationships. I've got a staff member at Black Card, big shout out to Tamikin, who for 20 years was in the promo and merch. They brought her over into Black Card. And when I interviewed her, she said to me, I'm not a salesperson, but I'm good with clients and building relationships. I said, well, you just do that. And one day we'll bring in a salesperson to do that. But it's such, like you said, it's not one of our qualities is to be out there in your face, putting pressure, picking up the phone, doing all the cold calling. But some of our people, kind of thrive in that environment as well.
I agree. I think why we've been so successful is the relationship piece. And, all of our partners, we've got, in our industry, it's very much contract driven. You have a contract which is, 3 to 5 years. And when that ends, we've been very successful at continuing and re-signing customers because of those relationships. So it's more about, I think it's very much it's not that we're not capable. It's probably like, if I could pick, something that, and one of my team has, talked about this, it's like this imposter syndrome thing. We feel like because we're doing it in a commercial lens, with a commercial lens on it, that we can't do it. But at the same time, people buy from people, and it is all about relationships. And if you can just put a little bit of a layer on top of having that commercial acumen that you can develop and learn through training and education, then you can, our people can be very successful at sales.
Yeah, or anything.
Anything.
Man, the relationship skills, I keep talking about this in circles that I'm in around emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, right? People that are culturally and emotionally intelligent are going to be the ones with jobs in the future, because robots will not be able to replace those jobs where you need emotional and cultural intelligence. So think about that, people, because robots are taking over the world. In terms of the future now, thinking about robots, thinking about technology, what do you see, in the next 10 years, what do you see your group doing or your people doing? Or is there some new little joint ventures? Is there anything you want to share with us?
Well, look, I mean, as I said, we're sort of at that, almost a quarter of our goal of that $100 million in revenue. So that's definitely the next sort of 5 to 10 years. We're focused on that. There'll be, yeah. I mean, technology's definitely playing a role in how we transact with customers. So there's tech platforms that we integrate with, which makes it more efficient. So customers, we're able to integrate with their ERP systems, and that way when they place an order, there's no human touch anywhere. It just goes seamlessly into our system. So we're all benefiting from that. The customer gets some efficiencies, and so do we.
So reporting
stuff,
pressing a button,
it
frees up people's time doing data, so that's telephones, yarns.
Absolutely,
what system are you using, and how did you find out about that particular software?
We have our own in-house developed stuff for integrating with customers, but then we're using HubSpot as our kind of CRM, and that's starting to get AI and other tools implemented into it, which is helping. So that definitely helps us from a sales point of view, and we use a bit of Microsoft Power BI for reporting as well. And again, that all of those large technology companies are starting to implement AI in their tools, which means in the future it'll become easier. You can just ask it a question and it'll pump out a report, which is great because we're already capturing all of that information when customers are ordering as well. So that's definitely for Muru. And I guess a shout out to my team, Jamie, Mel, my wife Laura, Christy and Diane. That's my team.
The dream team.
The dream team, yeah. So shout out to those guys. I mean, without them, I wouldn't be able to get across all the customer relationships and do what we do. And I guess, what we do, as I said, Muru means pathway. 20% of all of our profits goes back to community programs as well, and we've been doing that since 2014 when we formed the partnership with COS. And to this date, it's about $500,000 we've contributed since that time.
Wow!
And it's about $100K a year. My goal on that pathway to 100, the important piece of that is when I get to the 100 million, it's about $500,000 every year that we can contribute to community programs. Yeah,
and I think that's something innate. It's within us to give back to our community, to give back to our family, and to help our communities get ahead and to flourish. For those young kids, they might be from Lapa, they could be from Redfern, they could be from Cherbourg or Warrabinda. If they're listening or even watching this on YouTube, what would be your advice to them? Because for a long time, I don't think I ever thought business was possible for me as a young black kid from Redfern. What would you say?
Well, I guess when I was growing up, it was similar to yourself. I mean, all the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander role models were mostly in sport, and I was never that great at sport.
And still today,
we
still see it today.
Yeah, it's still very prevalent. Fortunately, now with a thriving Indigenous business sector, there are other role models for our mob to look up to, such as yourself. And I guess myself as well. If I can influence, the next generation to kind of get into business, then that's awesome. Hopefully, seeing me can change someone's life. But I guess I would say, if you're interested in, any professional career, there's always a potential to start your own business in that space. So I think find an area that you're passionate about and that you enjoy. And you don't even have to get into business immediately, but learn, that industry. The more you're passionate about something, the more you'll want to learn and understand it. And then
passion kind of it doesn't secure longevity, but passion will keep you going when times get tough. When you're passionate about something, like with Black Hat, I don't know how many times I've wanted to retire or quit, resign, not retire. How many times I've wanted to resign, walk away. But the passion has fueled me to keep on going. And the fact that I know that a lot of my community look up to me now, and a lot of my nieces and nephews have seen what I've been able to achieve, despite all of the kind of distractions within my life, especially in my 20s. I had no kids and I liked to party. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I still sometimes find myself at that crossroad. What's been some of the biggest learnings that you can share with us before we wrap up this yarn, some of your biggest learnings of either being in business, or you might want to talk about having a joint venture?
Yeah, I guess the biggest piece of advice that I was given was to learn to say no. And I think it's very powerful. I think at times when you're in business, you can take on more than what your capacity is. And I think learning to say no really just frees you up to focus on what's important. So I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned, definitely. And I think what you mentioned before about passion. I think when times get hard, there's a bump in the road, you run into a wall. It gives you that perseverance to push through, because without that, you're not going to succeed in business. You need to be able to push through. You need to be able to be resilient. Our people are very resilient, and so I think we make very good business people. And so that's and I suppose that's the biggest piece of advice I can give. And I guess speaking of passion, I probably would regret not giving a little shout out to the KO app, which is my passion project. Yeah. So
I've been looking at it. You know what I'm thinking about? Knockout. The knockout.
That's it.
Is it?
That's what it's all about. So
the KO, the Koori KO. When people talk about the KO in Sydney, they're black fellas because they've grown up going to the knockout. Was that your inspiration behind the name, KO?
Absolutely, yeah. So I suppose in 2016, my brother Brad and I, mostly his idea, but because he'd commentated the KO for so long.
Yeah.
But he kind of got annoyed with everybody messaging him all the time saying who won, what's the score, all this, while he's trying to commentate. So he said to me, "What do you think about making an app for the Koori Knockout?" And so I said, "Yeah, I can do that." I said I could do it when I didn't really know how to do it, but that was 2016. I think I, in 3 weeks, pulled something together and created the first version of the KO app. And so that KO app is a free resource for the community, and it allows them to access live scoring and news on the Koori Knockout over the October long weekend. So we released that in 2016 and had about 4,000 users roughly on that first year. And so we've done it every year since, making incremental improvements to the app. Obviously, COVID had a little bit of an impact there, but last year I was able to create a brand new version which performed a lot better, and we had about 13,000 users last year. So that is just one event. It's only about 4 or 5 days, as you know. So what happens generally is you get those users. Once the event's over, they uninstall the app, and that's it. So we want to be able to grow that offering and that resource for mob all around the country, for all Aboriginal sporting events, and become, I guess, the ESPN for black sport.
Far out.
So that's the goal.
The ESPN for black sport. You heard it here on the podcast. Can't wait to see what evolves over the next couple of years. I just want to say, I know we've got to wrap up. I just want to say congratulations on your success. Congratulations on being able to prove to a lot of, people in business that joint ventures can work. Having non-Indigenous people and partners can work, and can also, that mutually benefits both sides. And I really wanted to understand your story. I've never heard your story. So to hear it here, I'm like, yep, cool. I had a feeling that you initiated or instigated a lot of this. I didn't really know that Supply Nation, Michael McLeod played a part in that. These are people, especially Michael McLeod, big shout out to you, who have a lot of experience in dealing with corporates in the procurement space. There is the Indigenous Procurement Policy, the IPP. There are procurement targets within reconciliation action plans, and there's also the state-based procurement targets. So I know in Queensland I've been not directly involved, but with the QUIP. By sitting on an advisory board and looking at the spend across Queensland governments, I know that having these policies and mandating Indigenous spend has been able to, play a huge role in our success on how far we can go and how far we can grow as, small to medium enterprises. Supply Nation's coming up. Can't wait to see you. But I just want to say all the best with your future endeavours. And it was an absolute pleasure to get you finally on the Black Magic Woman podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Mandanara. Shout out to all the listeners and viewers. Thank you.
Download the app.
That's it. Download the KO app.
And support black businesses. If you need to get some office supplies, stationery, holler at this brother. I'm sure he'll look after you or one of his team members.
Absolutely. You can find me on all the social channels. Just reach out. Happy to help.
1-800? No. All righty. I hope you've enjoyed this yarn. Until next time, bye for now. If you'd like any more info on today's guest, please visit our show notes in the episode description. A big shout out to all you Deadly Mob and allies who continue to listen, watch and support our podcast. Your feedback means the world. You can rate and review the podcast on Apple and Spotify, or even head to our socials and YouTube channel and drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. The Black Magic Woman podcast is produced by Clint Curtis.